So to start off, can I ask you just the general intro questions? Where are you from and what brought you to Portugal?
Okay, I'll get it started. We lived in California in the United States, Northern California, actually, outside of Sacramento. Jeff worked for the state of California. I traveled the world doing trainings in behavioral health, and we were looking to retire. And Portugal had been high on the list from the very beginning. I first visited in 1979 as part of a trade mission from the State Department and fell in love with the country. And at the closing banquet, surprised myself by starting to cry and announced as I was toasting everybody farewell that, mark my words, I'm going to retire here. And so I've been telling that story for all those years. And as I was getting close to 70, Jeff turned to me and said, why are we talking about celebrating your birthday in the Caribbean for your 70th birthday? Why don't we just check out that Portugal? Because he was trying to convince me to retire. and,
Desperately.
And he had never been to Portugal. So I said, sure, let's do it. And we came to Portugal for a couple of weeks and came back, and that was it. We were hands down coming to Portugal.
And I could see what Jacques was talking about. We spent most of the time in the Algarve and some time in Lisbon. And I kind of understood what Jacques saw in Portugal. But being the practical one, I said, okay, if we're going to make your dream happen, we need to put some feet to this dream. And Jacques had mentioned that he'd been following with Live and Invest Overseas
For a couple of years.
And he told me about their overseas retirement conference, September 2019 in Houston, Texas. And I said, well, let's go register for that and go.
Ever the practical one.
Because we need to research this thoroughly.
Yep. Jeff wanted to test out Portugal to all of the other options that Live and Invest Overseas was bringing to the international conference. And indeed, that conference made it really clear in our heads.
Yeah.
We felt Portugal was perfect for us. And we had never been to northern Portugal, but just before we came, our nephew at Thanksgiving, where the whole family gathered together for this one last Thanksgiving before we left the country, and in 2019. And our nephew, who had done his studies in London at the graduate school at King's College, said, now, before you decide where you end up living, make sure you check out Porto in the north. That's my favorite spot in all of Europe that I saw during the time that I was living in Europe.
So what was your first impression when you got to this northern region of Portugal? I think, generally speaking, historically, the attention has mainly been focused on the Algarve, Lisbon as well, but the Algarve is really the retirement focus
Right.
for the past number of years. So what did you think when you first arrived in the north?
Well, what is amazing to me is how similar it was to Northern California. To me, Southern Portugal reminds me of Southern California.
Yep,
It's more
does.
arid, drier. But Northern Portugal, it's amazing. It was like, wow, this is beautiful. It's lush and it's green. It was just gorgeous.
The climate is really similar, very similar.
And we just loved how the weather was cooler than the Algarve, by I would say about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, if definitely the culture is completely different too. It's a lot more laid back, and it's a lot more family centric, we found.
The country of Portugal is the size of the state of Indiana. So, we figured wherever we settled, we'd be able to visit the whole country very easily. And being Californians, we were accustomed to, bopping all the way down to Southern California for long weekends and things like that. So it was not at all unusual for us we just needed to decide what part of the country was going to sing to us the best. And we found that when we got to northern Portugal, it just was exactly what we were looking for. And so that's why we settled down.
So we got another question just now. Mark says, hey guys, what's the terrain like? Is it as hilly as the south?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The city proper is reasonably flat. It kind of goes down a gentle slope into a river valley, but it is surrounded by hills and mounts. So it's basically a large river valley. The city itself is on kind of a mesa that drops down into another valley.
Yeah, it's like a bowl.
And but basically, it's pretty easy to navigate around, and definitely taking the buses. I gotta say, Braga has a pretty decent bus transit system that's very affordable to get around. And as Jacques mentioned earlier, it was a great way for us to explore the city and get to know the neighborhoods.
And also there's a regional bus system from Braga that's very easy to use as well, that takes you to the nearby cities of Barcelos or out to the coast, which is only 30 kilometers away. You just follow the riverbed all the way out to the beaches of the coast. It's very, very convenient. And of course, there's also the connection of the train system too, which gets you throughout all of Portugal and outside of Europe.
Yeah, it's very easy to take the train from Braga to the Algarve.
Okay, what about healthcare? So Portugal always comes up as a great destination for people who perhaps want an upgrade on their healthcare situation. At least comparable care at a lower cost. How has your experience with the system been?
Well, in 2022, I did have an experience. I had 2 surgeries, and the cost was pretty much next to nothing. I had complications after one surgery, and I had to go to emergency. And instead of paying a $150 copay, my copay was 17 euros, for example. And I had, as a state employee, I had really premium health care, but my share of costs was still, I was paying over $200 a month for both of us.
Our copay.
And you multiply that by 12, that's $2,400. And most people can get private health. It is when you are initially coming here, you do need to get private health insurance, but you can find it usually for much less than even 2,400.
Oh, yeah.
Euros.
400.
And then once you get plugged into once you get your residence card, then you do need to proactively register with the healthcare system. It's not done for you automatically. And then when you're plugged into the healthcare system, you can still use your private insurance and healthcare provider for like elective procedures, or if you need to get something done reasonably quick, and it's still very affordable. The copays fall anywhere between $15 to $35 a visit. Whereas, and then for any kind of emergencies, you would go to the state hospital, and then your fees are pretty much close to nothing.
Yeah, it's better healthcare service than what we had in the States. Portugal's healthcare is phenomenally good.
It took him longer to get his gallbladder removed than it did mine, which was one of the surgeries, which was surprising because we were with Kaiser, which is supposed to be one of the best in California.
But my elective gallbladder surgery took longer to schedule than his in Portugal here.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but it's not just the time, actually the quality of care.
Yeah, the quality of care is really great.
Phenomenal.
Amazing. And is it the case where once you're registered with the public health system, it's free in terms of, you're not doing a monthly payment, you're just paying the copays that you mentioned?
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's on a per visit. if there is a payment,
most everything is for free.
Most everything is for free.
Yeah, Jeff, I think every once in a while I had to pay a copay for something that is considered more elective because you showed up instead of going to your family practitioner.
Yeah, I think once or twice I had to pay €5.
It's just, but most everything is for free.
Instead of the $35 copay I would pay if I went back to the doctor in the States per visit required. It's pretty crazy.
Yep. That is crazy.
Yeah, almost everything under the national healthcare system is free.
And keep in mind, this is the reason for why they have higher than average taxes. Most people cry socialism and all that stuff, but Portugal and I think the rest of Europe really makes a very good case for universal health care.
Definitely. I say the same thing, talking about Spain, for instance, there is a payoff for the high taxes, and healthcare is just one of them. There's also a great education system and the public transportation that you mentioned, and community services and safety nets, etc. So there is a benefit that you really feel.
Yeah, very definitely.
Well, this leads us to an interesting area, which is just general cost of living. So is it fair to say that living in Braga or just in Portugal in general, it's an opportunity to reduce your monthly cost of living compared to the States?
Go ahead, dude.
Oh my God, yes. We were spending 3 to 4 times more a month living in Northern California on a monthly basis than what we spend here. Our budget is
we were making good money, but our budget was obscene, and we were just barely making it on our wages.
Yeah, but here we can live a beautiful retirement life on,
without having to work full time.
On less than $2,600 a month.
Yeah.
So no, it's very easy to do in Portugal.
I figured that was going to be your answer, but I didn't want to lead you to that conclusion. It's interesting because a lot of readers will write in and say, I've always dreamed of life in Europe, but I don't think I can afford it. But it seems like more and more you almost can't afford not to. The opportunities to save are just so much greater. People don't realize that it can be much more affordable.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Definitely agree.
Definitely, but more affordable than California.
Oh, much more so.
Okay, and then one last sort of nitty-gritty topic is residency. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, what sort of residency did you guys seek out when you got to Portugal or before you left?
We came in under the passive income residency.
The D7.
It's called the D7 in Portugal. And that's where we had to prove that we had enough annual income every year from our retirement benefits or any other sources, so that we did not become a burden to the state. And I think it was something like $1,800 a month, or
no, you wrote it was 12.
Oh, huh?
1,200, I think.
1,200 a month. Okay. 4 years later, and I've forgotten now. It's why I have a reboot button on my arm. Numbers and we don't get along very well. But
that number does change all the time, so you always want to check with your immigration lawyer.
Definitely check it out with the immigration lawyer, because that is something that is based upon
it's not fixed
minimum wage and the annual. It's something that it's a moving number. But anyhow, that's how we did it, and along with that, you have to have private health insurance in Portugal, so that again you are proving that when you come in under your visa to establish residency and to live long enough to establish residency and to go through the residency procedure, that you're not going to become a burden to the country. And also we had to have a lease to show that we were not going to come to the country and then end up on a sidewalk someplace. And we also had to go through the screening of our driver's record and our
background check,
criminal record.
Your VFS appointment,
right? And all those were the requirements for getting the visa to come in, and then after the visa, then we had to show up for our appointment with the immigration services with copies of basically our bank statements for the last 3 months, and to prove that we had enough money coming in all the time, and we weren't going to be a burden to the state. And boom, we got residency. And it was good for the first 2 years, and then we got renewed, and that's good for the next 3 years. And then after that, we choose to either renew our residency or to go for citizenship.
Jay's asking, why Braga instead of the smaller coastal towns like Viana do Castelo or Esposende?
Well, truthfully, we were living in Braga for 2 years while we were building a condominium in a quiet little coastal town south of Braga.
So we live on the coast now, if I may, dear.
Yeah.
Those areas, we found living on the coast is as nice as it is. It gets very windy here. The winters can be brutal when you factor in the wind coming off the Atlantic and the cold, rainy weather. Those areas you mentioned are perfect if you like to go kite surfing. We have it here in our area of Matosinhos. Jock was the one that wanted to live near the coast. I tend to be more of a mountain boy, but we compromised on this.
Yep. So, but we're just, 35, 40 minutes away from Braga. And we like the energy of the city, but we really like to live in more of a quiet. And where we're living in a little freguesia of Matosinhos that we're the only English-speaking people that live here.
No, we're second.
Oh, now there's a second. Oh. But anyhow, and that was, it's everybody has their own different criteria. But I have to admit, I definitely, if I was a city person and enjoyed living in the city, Braga definitely, hands down, would be the spot where I would want to live. It's flatter than Porto and Lisbon, and it has this rich culture that I just love.
And it's a shelter valley that doesn't quite get the exposure to the elements that the areas mentioned by your questioner here. That's Viana do Castelo, Esposende, or Boa de Varzim.
But, every person is different. So we're not saying that those are not the great places. And truth of the matter is, we're actually living in we're 2.5 blocks away from the ocean, but just far enough away so that we don't get the brunt of it in the winter.
If you like those places, then consider kite surfing.
I think what you guys did in moving there, and I know it was influenced a bit by moving during the pandemic, but it relates to this question. We always say, go try a place out, try it at different times of the year. Spend it, do an extended stay in summer and winter and see it at its best and worst. And do that before you commit to, say, a property purchase. Shop around a little bit, try it out, test the waters, etc. But it sounds like you could, like you were saying at the beginning, be based in one of these coastal towns and still enjoy the best of Braga or even Porto or the rest of Portugal as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And a lot of people did the reverse. They started off in Braga, and then they explored. And some of those people did go to Viana do Castelo. Some of those people went to Ponte Lima, which is further north. Other people just went right outside of the city because they wanted a house with land, which is something more common outside of the city center.
Yeah.
It can be a starting point into other areas that speak to you more.
We were at a party with friends just this last weekend, a housewarming party. This is the third place that they've lived in, second that they've purchased in being in the country less time than we have.
Right.
For 3 years.
They started in Braga.
In a rental.
Just outside of the city.
To Sotelo.
And then they just moved to Comenia next to the border with Spain, or the border with Spain.
Yeah, everybody follows their dreams in whatever way in fashion. And they've assured us that they're going to be staying put where they are right now.
So follow your bliss.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no rules to this, and there's no standard formula. You don't have to settle down for the rest of your life if you don't want to. You can move around. Maybe you'll try out Spain next year, or there's no right or wrong way to go about this.
Yeah, and after we get our citizenship in Portugal, there's nothing that says that we have to stay here. We can move all around all of the EU.
There you go.
Buy property and spend half the year there, half the year here. Lots of choices and options.
Plenty of choices and options available to us. And after all, we're still young yet.
Exactly.
We're still young yet.
Okay, so we're coming up on our time. I just wanted to ask you about any other downsides. So far, you painted a really nice picture of Braga and the surrounding areas, and it all sounds idyllic, but I'm sure, like the wind and the cold, rainy weather occasionally, there are some downsides. So is there anything that we should know before we wrap up the call?
Yeah, I'll say.
Okay.
I mean, Braga did get a lot of rain this past winter, and there was some flooding along the rivers. But, as long as you're not living near either of those places, everything was fine. But really, there's a lot of construction going on with Braga because there's a lot of investment happening in Braga. So you'll see the city, especially the center of the city, covered with cranes, because a lot of people are buying these older Braga properties, and then they're doing these incredible full-on renovations with them and transform them into either homes or lodging or apartments or Airbnbs, whatever. It is affecting the traffic a little bit and some of the bus routes. They're in the process of building a big $16 million hotel right in the center of Braga.
Wow.
It's almost done. It's pretty impressive.
It's going to be a nice project.
They took a convent and kept the face of the convent and then put this hotel all behind it. And from the street, it just looks like the old convent front, but it's a hotel. It's amazing.
Right. But I think don't come with open expectations. Portugal is nothing like the United States. I think the most common mistake people make is people come here thinking, I'm going to make this America. And you can't. This is the Portugal. Portugal is going to be Portugal. If you want America, stay in America, but come to Portugal with an open heart and an open mind and realize that it's just part of the process.
Yep, definitely. You have to be adaptable. And, if you're leaving the States for a reason, then maybe this is the trade-off. You need to change a few things about your perspective.
I have to admit that it was one of the things that I learned very, very quickly when we got here is to stop looking back, stop trying to compare it. And, I'm not trying to see what is similar, and I'm not trying to see if the McDonald's tastes the same here as it does there, because they don't use GMOs here, but they do in the US, that kind of stuff. Well, I didn't eat McDonald's in the US anyways, but it's that kind of thing. It just, stop comparing it and just embrace it and find out what is so new. It's the adventure of learning the new culture, learning the new country, learning the new people, and listening to them.
And there are people who've come here and have come to Braga, as a matter of fact, spent a couple of years and they said, you know what, Portugal isn't for me. Maybe I need to go somewhere else or need to go back. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you are making an important decision, but it's not one that you have to regret.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got one last question, if you don't mind, from Ian. Any hassles with renting for a while first?
Well, you want to rent Absolutely first before you decide if you want to stay or buy anything in Braga. Definitely go with a real estate agent. Don't try to do this on your own. The rules and regulations revolving rentals are very complex, and you want to be flexible, and you want to clearly state your expectations to what you're looking for to your real estate agent. They will do their best to try to meet you, but keep in mind there are some things that you need to be aware of when you're a renter. Unlike the United States, you may be required to supply some of the electrodomestics, like a washing machine or a refrigerator, which you can, of course, take with you when you're done with the rental. But you're going to need to supply some of your own things.
Yeah. It's not at all unusual to be renting an apartment that there are absolutely no light fixtures in the ceiling, just wires dangling down, because that is very Portugal. People come with all of their own light fixtures and put them in. and people come with their own refrigerator and stove and put them in. It's learning there are differences, and it was an eye opener at first when we were first looking at rentals. So why do they rent things without anything?
And there is,
but they do.
And there is wiggle room on the rent, but be reasonable. Don't expect a huge.
There's not a lot of negotiation,
especially if you're trying to rent a place in the center. Rentals in the center are difficult because there's a limited availability. It's high demand. So that's going to be a challenge in Braga. You may not have a lot of wiggle room negotiation-wise.
If somebody's renting something, they've decided what the price is. They're not trying to negotiate. And I'm just letting you know that.
Yeah.
It sounds like it'll be more affordable than, say, rentals in the US anyway. So
very definitely. Very definitely.
They're still very affordable.
Yeah.
Prices have gone up, but it's still affordable.
All right. Well, I think you guys have shared so much great advice, and you're great spokespeople for Portugal. So I want to say a big thank you for spending the past almost hour with me and answering all these questions and, responding to the attendees' questions as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
And thank you to everyone who came out. And I will see you at the next OLU webinar. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.